Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 here as we continue our preview of SEC football teams for the 2022 season. Today we get to South Carolina, which Blake was one of the more surprising teams in the SEC a year ago, and particularly the way it played in the second half and in its bowl game.
Yeah, Shane Beamer did a really good job, I think, to say the least, in year one. And I mean, I think that's why there's so much optimism now heading into this season. We'll talk about kind of the personnel and all that, but yeah, I mean, it's just man, you did not expect them to make the jump. I think that they made, considering kind of what came before that and just the struggles. We know South Carolina has been up and down in terms of its program and all that, and I mean, him just coming in and completely flipping, the culture and everything that they wanted to do there. And I mean, I think he just built it the way he wanted to build it, and then the victories came along with that sooner than people probably thought they would in terms of that many. And yeah, it was surprising, probably if you go back to going into last season, but I think as the season progressed, probably wasn't that surprising for them to do what they did because you could kind of see it right away that they had a
Mm.
they had a process and they were going to work that process and it worked. And now we go into this year with a lot more hype surrounding this team, and it's just a matter of seeing what can they add to that in terms of win total. But yeah, certainly off to a good start there in Columbia.
This is what I would call the wait but team in the SEC because you look at them a year ago and just so many deficiencies, and they overachieved and went through four quarterbacks and used a non-quarterback to quarterback at times and all kinds of stuff and ended up 7-6. And you look at this team leaving last season, you go, well, it can't pass. Well, wait, but they had the preseason Heisman favorite from this time a year ago,
Yeah.
with some weapons to go with him through the portal. They were an abysmal run blocking team. They lost Kevin Harris. Wait, but they've got some talent in the backfield, and I think all five starters return. That they were horrible at defending the run. Wait, but a couple of five-star recruits, from the past have a chance to settle in and do some things. Plus Zach Pickens, who is getting some preseason NFL first round love, and just I feel like this is a team that Ole Miss is the team I guess that got the most attention for what it did in the portal, but South Carolina I think did about as much as anybody to really help itself where it needed it.
Yeah, and I mean that's always the name of the game in the SEC is you're gonna lose some guys in terms of off the pros and transfers just the way that they are, and that's become kind of the new normal for everyone is you've just got to be able to go out and find some guys that are going to kind of fit how you want to play schematically and all those other things. And it seems like South Carolina's done that because it's not like it's a team that's having to completely rebuild the roster or anything like that. I mean, they have a good nucleus coming back in a lot of different areas. I think you certainly look at the strengths, I think, in the secondary, those kind of things you're going to look at. You got a lot of returning starters on offense, guys that you feel like will be able to build off of last year, specifically now with a quarterback that could put him in a position to make everybody else kind of elevate their games a little bit. So yeah, and then you're talking about just bringing in the new guys that you're going to have. So again, I think that goes to the coaching staff's ability to kind of identify what those needs have been, and they did that right away last year in terms of what they were able to do with the roster they had, and now they're going to plug in these guys that you feel like these are handpicked guys by this staff, like these are guys that are coming in to fill these certain roles, and so yeah, it'll be interesting to see on both sides of the ball how some of these guys get acclimated, and again, if that can kind of make help them push even further as a program this year. So
Blake, nobody in college football saw his star fall more in the last year than Spencer Rattler. Shane Beamer had a relationship. I think this will end up being a huge get in the portal for Carolina, which that's no huge proclamation there. Everybody knows the ability. And particularly when you compare to where Carolina left off at quarterback from a year ago, where does Spencer Rattler fall in terms of performance this year? Because the ranges of outcomes in his college career have ranged from maybe best player in the country to not even good enough to start.
Yeah, we always say I think the change of scenery can do a lot for anyone, and I think just I mean, it's not like there's not going to be pressure on him this year, right? But I think that the pressure that certainly was on him a year ago, and knowing kind of the situation, anytime you mention the word Heisman Trophy, like immediately the kind of pressure that places on anybody. And I still think though that the scenery change could be significant. And again, I think it's we know the potential's there. Like we know the talent's there for him to be as good as he, could be. Like he could be very, very good, and he could be what catapults South Carolina, into another stratosphere after what they did last year. But like you said, there's still a range there, just given what we've seen before. And I just feel like though the new start to me feels like it's going to be something that benefits him specifically. I think it's going to benefit South Carolina, and I think you just sort of you push that aside, and I think you just like, okay, this is the new team, this is the new offense I'm working in. I think we start from game one with him versus necessarily just going back to what he did there. And I understand like the hesitations with that, but I think that this will work out. I'm not saying that it'll work out to the point that he wins the Heisman Trophy, but let's be honest. This is a South Carolina offense that needs a jolt. And, it's one that I think he could provide them given what they were second to last, thinking scoring last year in the SEC. Passing game was pretty much almost non existent at times. I think they were 13th in passing. And I don't know. I feel like they've had an entire offseason to kind of figure this out. And I'm very curious. Maybe that's the best word. I'm curious to see how this plays out.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% confident, right? But I'm curious. And I think they will be able to do some things with him that will benefit both parties in terms of maybe being able to limit those mistakes that he made at Oklahoma in terms of the, just turnovers and that kind of stuff. I think they can put him in those kind of situations. And, also, I think just looking at South Carolina's offense, I feel like he can be someone that can play off of the guys he's going to have around them because, as we said, I think the importance of him, their running game has to be better, their offensive line has to be better. If those things are better, and they kind of all tie together, right? Where it's he needs them to be better for him to be where he needs to be, but they also have to be better for him to be able to get to that level, I think. So it's all going to kind of tie together, I think, on this offense. So it's going to be very interesting to see kind of how that plays out and those multiple areas, not just with him, but what else is around him too. So,
Well, I feel like he's got some pieces in the passing game. Um, Van was a good player for them. Joyner was a good player for them. Bell, one of the probably better returning tight ends in the league, to which they add the Stogner kid who transferred from Oklahoma. So I feel like you've got pieces in the passing game. You've got a running back in Marshawn Lloyd, who was a former 5-star recruit. Again, that was an issue for them a year ago. The injury to Harris didn't help. I don't think he was ever well from day one. And we talked about their line where they weren't very good in pass blocking a year ago, couldn't run against anybody. But you get all those guys back for better or worse, and you figure that group's going to be better a year improved just from experience and cohesiveness. So I'm really intrigued to see what they've got around him and how good those guys are.
and by the way, too, just quickly, let's not act like he was someone that just completely fell flat on his face either. Like I think sometimes when I've seen like some of the stuff out there, like he's still accomplished some things. Like he's still someone that
Yeah.
I think I've kind of seen some of that. Now again, maybe that's just opposing fan bases if we can, that having fun with it, but it's not like that he was just this terrible player that couldn't do anything right. Like I think I want to make sure that's perfectly clear. Again, that the talent is certainly there, and we could see some of the things that he was able to achieve in terms of this the passing skills and those kind of things. So, but yes, I think what he has around him is going to be just as important because, like you said, I think that's where they have to be able to run the ball more effectively. That's going to take some of the pressure off of him too, and I think that's a big priority for them to be able to move the offense down the field. Is they've got to have some kind of rushing attack that's consistent. But again, to be able to do that, what do you have to have? You have to have a good offensive line play, And I think that's something where they've also understand they have to be better and more consistent to be able to move the ball too. So with all of that, I think you've got a good wide receiver group here. It's a talented group that I think will bring. I think Rattler can bring more consistency at that group as long as again he can kind of help elevate those guys maybe and vice versa. So I mean, I think I like the offense. Like I do. I mean, even if, certainly adding him to the mix makes it more intriguing, but I think even if you just push that to the side for a second, I think there's enough talented pieces here that at least, pique your curiosity about what they could accomplish. But I think it's really going to start with the line play to me is really going to be what kind of defines because that's everything, right? That makes the running
Yeah.
game better. That makes him better in terms of, being in the pocket, those kind of things. So I think that's going to be a big storyline going into the season for South Carolina.
Well, defense will be interesting too. They shaved 12 points a game off their total from 2020, which that's not apples to apples because that was a 10-game conference schedule, and so you had some much easier games a year ago. But again, we talked about how they got run on, but it looks like they have done some things to address that. There's certainly some talent along the defensive line. Again, with Pickens being the main guy returning that people know. They lose what the conference's leader in picks from a year ago, but they get back, a corner who's one of the best in the league, maybe an All-American in Cam Smith. I mean, they got some other names there that have played a good bit on that back seven. I don't know how much better they get because they improved a lot a year ago. But again, that's one of those that looks like it's trending in the right direction.
Yeah, lose some starters, on the line on the defensive side, but like you said, I think they'll be able to plug in enough to make it work. I mean, their secondary is going to be excellent. They were the top passing defense in the league last year. I think that even again, you take someone away like that and takeaways are going to be important too, right? I think that's something where we know kind of what this team could do in terms of forcing turnovers, and that's going to be important too. And I think that's where it's going to be it's something they can lean on in terms of that secondary. Their passing defense will be, a big part of obviously what they're going to do on that side. The pass rush, we always say, is important for any SEC team in terms of being able to get that pass rush and kind of disrupt the other team's offense before it can even get to that point. So yeah, I mean, I like the defense. Like, and again, I think that's kind of what you expect. And again, I think the anchor of that defense is going to be what they can achieve. I think in the secondary and forcing the turnovers, having the takeaways, like that could once again be the name of the game for them. And if they can just get that push from the defensive line, add to that pass rush, those kind of things, I think that that as we always say, that will make things easier on the offense too. And when you combine that together, you should have a good defense. You could have one of the most improved offenses in the country, depending on how things play out. Good quarterback, good wide receiver group. Should have an improved offensive line, running game. Those kind of things combined, as we said, that's also going to make things easier on your defense. So, yeah, I don't really have a lot of bones to pick with the defense. I think probably maybe you look at the defensive line just because they lose some starters, but I think their defense will be just fine.
Yeah, they did lose Enigbari, who was one of the better ones in the league a year ago. Pro Football Focus loved that kid. He just
Yeah.
rated well every week. But we talked about their schedule in a separate video. The Georgia State game is probably a little sneakily harder than most people would think than Arkansas, Georgia off the bat. You have some winnable games in there early. I think South Carolina State's on there. Charlotte's on there. So there's some opportunities for wins, but boy, if they could get 2-0 off the bat, which I think at Arkansas will be a tough one, that would really inject some excitement into this program. That Arkansas game, I think, will be a very good barometer of where Carolina is, win or lose.
Yeah, not an easy schedule, but we say that for everybody in the SEC for the most part. That's as we talked about in the schedule video, which you can find on our channel. Just search for South Carolina schedule preview. Um, I mean, having week 2 at Arkansas, then coming back home against Georgia. Look, we did talk about that in I think it may have been the Georgia preview too. That's an interesting game because if you are 2-0 going into that one, I think it's an early kickoff, September 17th in Columbia. We know stadium's going to be rocking. That's an interesting setup if you go win that game at Arkansas. Like you said, if you're 2-0, I'm not saying they're going to beat Georgia, but that could certainly make it interesting, right? And so I think that is, look, it's a task for anybody when you're having to open the season. We talked about some of these other schedules where you just play maybe all four of your non-conference games up front or whatever, play several non-conference up front. But to have a road trip to Arkansas, a top 20 team, hosting the defending national champions the following week, man, we are going to learn a lot about South Carolina
Mm-hmm.
early in the schedule. And I think, again, that's also fascinating too. When we talk about Spencer Rattler and where the offense is at, we're going to know 100% where things can kind of get to or where things kind of stand after 3 games, because playing Arkansas, that's a tough road game in an unbelievable, environment, which it's going to be. And then playing a team like Georgia, knowing what kind of challenges they're going to present from a defensive standpoint, yeah, we will know exactly where it stands. But I also like the fact that after you get done with those two, it's like you come back home, you play Charlotte, play South Carolina State. We're not gonna underestimate South Carolina State, but I just feel like, it's one of those things where it's not Arkansas and Georgia the following 2 weeks. And I think that kind of sets up to where, like you said, I mean, if you win those first two, maybe even if you lose at Georgia, then you got a big swing game coming there October 8th at Kentucky. Now with South Carolina schedule, they do get Arkansas, they get A&M, and of course you also get Clemson on the schedule too. So like
On the
that
road.
makes, yeah, I was going to say, and that makes it tough, right? So when you talk about kind of what teams you draw from the West, it's never going to be easy no matter who you draw. But I think drawing Arkansas on the road, playing a Texas A&M team like we talked about, they seem to believe that they're a top 10 team right now. What are they, 6th going into the season?
Mm.
So you look at all those things, but I think your East games are, certainly when you look at the schedule, you're going to get Tennessee at home. You play at Florida, play Kentucky. Like it's a tough schedule. There's no other way to put it. So again, we've said this with some other teams. South Carolina could be 7-6 again this year, and they could be a better team. It's just finding those number of wins compared to, like we said, if you compare
Yeah.
this year and last year, they could be better, but it may not necessarily show up in terms of getting to 9 or 10 wins or anything. It just maybe 7-6, and you may still be better off and be more improved as a program, even though you may not add to the win total.
Yeah, a 7-6 this year would almost without a doubt be a better team than last year's 7-6. And you're seeing them ranked mid-40s in the polls that I look at that rank all 131 teams, which is a big improvement over where Carolina was this time last year. I think 80s, 90s most places, and that's the difference Shane Beamer has made in 1 year.
Yep, it is, and we always say a coach can change things
Yeah.
dramatically, and he changed it dramatically in one season. And now, more optimism, more hype surrounding them. Although, again, we're not talking like title hype, but we're talking bringing in a former Heisman Trophy candidate at quarterback, having, like we said, a very good wide receiver group, I think, to work with, returning starters on that side of the ball, excellent defense in terms of the secondary. Like, yeah, and I mean that's the thing. Like I said, I'll go back to it. I mean, you could have one of the more improved offenses in the country in terms of just scoring wise, and you could have a pass defense that certainly can be elite in terms of what we've seen from it. So I think you add those things together, and there's a lot that you could look forward to if you're a South Carolina fan. But like we said, it's also going to make for a very entertaining season just because of who they're going to play. And it should be fun to see just kind of how they progress. And again, whether you like it or not, the focus is going to be on the offense early on. And I think seeing how that offense looks is going to be very fascinating. So,
Well, we have either previewed your favorite SEC team or we are going to preview your favorite SEC team. The best way to know is to hit that subscribe button, which a lot of people have done recently. So with that, for Blake Lovell, I'm Chris Lee. Thanking you for watching today. Again, hit that subscribe button. We'll see you again very soon with our next SEC football preview.